Okay, so we're going to remove these top screws, and we'll just take a look at the pieces. We have a top cap. We have what we call the mounting bar, skid plate. This front portion is removable as well, and that's the blade holder. Blade holder comes off. One thing I'd like to point out on the holder bar is these three holes. The 1032 tapped hole, it contains a set screw, and that set screw, what that ends up doing is it puts pressure on the skid plate when this is all assembled to take out any slack, and we'll show that in a little bit better detail later. So on your machine side frames, you should have a grouping of holes that looks like so. You're going to have a 1/2 inch clearance hole, a 2/4 20 clearance holes. That's where the slitter unit goes. Some machines have multiple positions. Now in the equipment here in the machine, I have mounted the 1 by 1/2 inch slide bar. That's step 1 in mounting the unit. Okay, so now we'll want to have the blade holder put back onto the assembly. Put the skid plate towards the rear of the assembly here. Okay, so now we're going to take and put the mounting bar onto the slide bar. Notice the skid plate will go onto the back. And this is my preferred method of installing. You're going to slide that up, that, from the bottom. Put the top plate on. And usually I will just start one screw. Center one will work, 1032. And once you have that started, you can pretty much let go and install your other screws. Okay, I've installed those top 3 screws in the unit, and notice it rocks around a little bit on the bar. And there's a little bit of play in there, which we want in order for it to move back and forth. But that's what these 3 set screws here are for. There's 3 set screws in the back, and you can put pressure on the skid plate with these set screws. You probably don't want to put too much on there, just enough to eliminate this rocking. And we can accomplish that with these set screws back here. If we go too tight, we won't be able to move it back and forth, so I'm just going to loosen up on them a little bit. Don't have any rock, and I can move it back and forth. On to the next step. Next step is we are going to take this square nut, install it into this slot. Now it's time for the lateral adjustment knob. This knob allows us to position it laterally in the machine, position the slitter blades, and I'll go through the parts of this. We have this threaded shaft with a knob on the end, 1/2 inch split locking collar goes on, and then we have a set of thrust washers and a thrust bearing. It goes on, thrust washer, thrust bearing, thrust washer. Now when we install this into the machine, the side frame will be in between, but we're going to have another thrust washer pair with thrust bearing and a set screw style locking collar. We're going to install the lateral adjustment knob into the 1/2 inch hole, clearance hole in the side frame. Push that in. Now our thrust washer set. This thrust washer with the thrust bearing in the center has to go on, followed by the set screw locking collar. That goes on, and we are going to thread that into the square nut that I showed you previously. And I like to thread it in and position it basically so, notice the threads end here. We'll want to lock this locking collar on the portion of the shaft that has no threads, so we don't damage any threads and leave a little bit of clearance here. That's it. Next step is to install the slitter blades themselves. Notice they have a square-headed screw that will fit into the T-slot on the removable bar. Now we can see 2 blades installed, and I am moving the unit side to side. That's what our lateral adjustment knob does, is it allows us to adjust the position on our web. An interesting thing to note, again, is this bar is removable. You can leave the blade holders in place and remove the 2 flathead screws on the end and just remove this bar completely, leaving the rest of the assembly in the machine. If it's not in the way, you can leave it in the machine and reinstall the razor bar when you need to.